Today, we are digging into a source that makes a really staggering claim, that there's been a corporate coup that has totally rewired American media. We're going to walk through the source's entire argument, which, you'll see, connects incredible wealth, a very specific ideology, and the fight for control over the information you see every single day.
The source we're looking at kicks things off with this bombshell of a line. I mean, it really sets the stakes high from the get-go. The whole argument is that these massive, seismic shifts are happening behind the screen, way out of the public eye, and they have huge consequences for how we think about news, entertainment, and even truth itself.
And this really gets to the heart of it. The source is asking us to consider this. What if that idea of an open internet, this kind of chaotic marketplace of ideas, is just over? What if it's been replaced by something way more controlled, way more centralized, a system where just a few powerful players hold all the keys?
Okay, so here's the core claim from the source, and it is an explosive one. It alleges that the Ellison family, using a massive financial play, has basically taken over a media empire that includes CBS, Paramount, and Warner Bros. Discovery. And according to the source, this isn't just business. It's framed as an ideological takeover with what it specifically calls a pro-Zionist agenda. So let's break down exactly how the source says this all went down.
So, how in the world did this happen? Well, according to the source, it all boiled down to a super high-stakes bidding war for one of the most valuable collections of cultural assets on the planet, Warner Bros. Discovery. And this, folks, was a real battle of the titans. So Netflix, the original disruptor, they jump into the ring with what seemed like a really smart surgical plan. They wanted the crown jewels, the streaming service HBO Max, and that legendary Warner film library. The idea was to grab those and then just jettison what they considered the toxic assets, like all the old-school cable networks.
And they weren't messing around. They put a serious offer on the table, $82.7 billion. This was a massive number, right? It was meant to show they weren't just kicking the tires, they were here to win and completely reshape the future of streaming.
But then, the game completely changed. The source describes this hostile tender offer coming from Skydance, backed by the just immense wealth of the Ellison Trust. All of a sudden, the bid rockets up to an all-cash offer of $108.4 billion. This wasn't just a counteroffer. It was a show of overwhelming brute force.
And believe it or not, that wasn't even the end of it. The final winning bid came in at an absolutely astonishing $110.9 billion. That final number just completely blew Netflix out of the water, and it secured not just the streaming assets, but the entire company, cable networks and all. When you look at how this all went down, you can really see the raw escalation. You've got Skydance's first bids, Netflix making a strategic move, and then these final all-cash knockout blows from the Ellison-backed Skydance. The source really presents this as a moment where pure financial power just steamrolled corporate strategy. It's like Netflix thought it was playing chess, but its opponent just went ahead and bought the entire board.
Now, the immediate aftermath, as described in the text, is, well, it's pretty grim. To service the massive debt from this nearly $111 billion deal, the new owners are reportedly getting ready to slash $16 billion in costs. The source, even citing Netflix's own CEO, calls this a gut punch for the creative community, predicting thousands of writers, journalists, and production staff are going to lose their jobs.
And this brings us to the source's central argument about why this takeover is so different. It's not just about business. The claim is that it's about building an ideological fortress. And to understand that, we have to look at the man the source points to as the key player here, Larry Ellison.
The source puts together a really striking profile of Larry Ellison. It claims his company, Oracle, got its start by providing database technology to the CIA. In fact, they were its very first customer. The source also states the name Oracle itself comes from a CIA project name. The profile then goes on to identify him as the largest private donor to the Friends of the Israel Defense Forces and points to his public belief that AI surveillance is necessary to keep citizens on their best behavior. And to put a really fine point on that financial support, the source highlights this number, at least $26.6 million in confirmed donations from Ellison to the Friends of the Israel Defense Forces, or FIDF. This detail is used by the source to argue for a deep, direct financial link between Ellison's personal fortune and the Israeli military. This right here illustrates how the source claims the connection goes way beyond just donations. It alleges that Ellison's company, Oracle, built a highly secure underground data center in Jerusalem. And its purpose, according to the source, is to provide AI and data services directly to the Israeli military. It's a project the source describes as being genocide-proof, which is a very loaded term used to imply a level of infrastructural commitment that goes way beyond simple political support.
The source brings in his quote from Pink Floyd's Roger Waters to kind of frame what it sees as the struggle for information. Waters, who's a really vocal critic of Israel, is presented as an example of someone who believes truth isn't just given to you by powerful interests, it has to be fought for. The implication from the source is that in a media landscape controlled by these interests, independent voices are seriously under threat.
So, with Netflix now defeated and this new media giant taking shape, what happens next? Well, the source pivots to look at Netflix's options, detailing what some financial analysts are calling a Plan B for survival in this brand new, consolidated market.
The advice came from a pretty well-known investor, Mario Gabelli, who watched this whole bidding war play out. Think about it. With competitors like Disney, Paramount, and Warner now all consolidated into these massive self-contained empires, Netflix is kind of left out in the cold. So Gabelli's advice, which he gave on Bloomberg TV, was direct and simple. Go partner with Sony.
Now, why Sony? Well, the logic laid out in the source is actually pretty compelling. Sony is the only major Hollywood studio that hasn't built its own global streaming service. Instead, they prefer to license their content out, basically acting as an arms dealer of intellectual property. A partnership would give Netflix access to an absolute treasure trove of content, including the massive anime library from Crunchyroll and, maybe most importantly, the entire Spider-Man cinematic universe.
But the source also sounds a big note of caution here. It points out that history is just littered with the wreckage of massive media mergers. I mean, look at some of the most famous flameouts. The disastrous AOL/Time Warner merger, which was basically destroyed by a culture clash, to AT&T's failed acquisition of those very same assets, which suffered from just a fundamental misunderstanding of the creative business.
And this brings us to the really big question the source is raising. Will this new, Ellison-backed media behemoth actually succeed where so many others have failed? Or will what the source calls the monopolist instinct just inevitably clash with the creative process, leading to another spectacular collapse? Okay, this next section is where we connect all these high-level corporate games directly to your couch. The source argues that the real mechanism of control isn't just about what gets made, but how it's presented to you. It's all about the code, the algorithms, and the psychology of choice. To explain this new power structure, the source introduces a concept called Technofeudalism. The basic idea is that we've moved beyond capitalism into a new system where we're all essentially digital serfs. We're paying rent with our data and our money to a new class of cloud lords who own the entire digital infrastructure of our lives.
So how does this control actually work in practice? The source points to something called the algorithm adaptation effect. And this is a really crucial concept. It means that recommendation algorithm isn't some neutral servant just finding things you'll like. No, it's an active agent shaped by pre-existing data that guides you toward becoming the kind of consumer the system wants you to be. It reinforces and can even create your own personal filter bubble.
And this data shows you the battlefield perfectly. These platforms know that if you don't pick something to watch in about 90 seconds, they risk losing you for the night. So they use these psychological principles like choice overload and decision fatigue. By flooding you with options, they make you tired, and a tired consumer is way more likely to just accept the default recommendation, the one that was chosen for you by their biased algorithm.
And so we end with this final, really provocative thought from the source material. It reframes the simple act of watching a show into a political one. In a world where these information empires are being built and consolidated, the source urges us to question not just what we're watching, but who is controlling the master switch. And maybe more importantly, what stories are they ensuring we never get to see at all?